you caught me. I'm sorry, I was in the process of starting reading Percy Jackson and the Olympians, Book 1, The Lightning Thief, by Rick Riordan. And yes, there is a TV series about this. And at the end of this book, I'd recommend actually watching the series because it's actually a good series, and season 2 will actually follow the second book, and if I'm not mistaken, it will be out in 2025. Yes. Season 2 will actually arrive to Disney Plus in 2025. Okay, so let's get into book 1. Now, there are several books in the Percy Jackson and the Olympians, the first series. You have The Lightning Thief, Sea of Monsters, The Titan's Curse, The Battle of the Labyrinth, The Last Olympians, The Demigod File, Percy Jackson's Greek God, illustrated by John Rucco, The Lightning Thief, the graphic novel, The Sea of Monsters, the graphic novel, The Titan's Curse, the graphic novel. And that's all in the first series. Now, season 1 actually was all based off of The Lightning Thief. Season 2 of Percy Jackson and the Olympians will be based off of The Sea of Monsters. Now, the second set is the Kane Chronicles. The Red Pyramid, Thorn of Fire, The Serpent's Shadow, The Kane's Chronicles Survival Guide, The Kane Chronicles Survival Guide, the interactive version, The Red Pyramid, the graphic novel, The Throne of Fire, the graphic novel. Now the next set is The Heroes of Olympus, The Lost Hero, The Son of Neptune, The Mark of Athena, The House of Hades, The Blood of Olympus, The Demigod Diaries, The Lost Hero, the graphic novel, The Son of Neptune, the graphic novel. He also has short stories, The Son of Sebok, a Carter Kane Percy short story, The Staff of Seraphis, an Annabeth Chase Sadie Kane adventure, The Crown of Ptolemy with Percy Jackson, Annabeth Chase, Carter Kane, and Sadie Kane. And that's all that he has, at least on the Kindle. Now, this is actually dedicated to Haley, who heard the story first. Chapter 1. I accidentally vaporized my pre-algebra teacher. I'm going to try and get through as much of the story as I can. So here we go. Look, I didn't want to be a half-blood. If you're reading this because you think you might be one, my advice is close this book right now. Believe whatever lie your mom or dad told you about your birth and try to lead a normal life. Being a half-blood is dangerous. It's scary. Most of the time, it gets you killed in painful, nasty ways. If you're a normal kid reading this because you think it's fiction, great. Read on. I envy you for being able to believe that none of this ever happened. But if you recognize yourself in these pages, If you feel something stirring inside, stop reading immediately. You might be one of us. And once you know that, it's only a matter of time before they sense it too, and they'll come for you. Don't say I didn't warn you. My name is Percy Jackson. I'm 12 years old. Until a few months ago, I was a boarding student at Yancey Academy, a private school for troubled kids in upstate New York. Am I a troubled kid? Yeah, you could say that. I could start at any point in my short, miserable life to prove it. But things really started going bad last May, when our 6th grade class took a field trip to Manhattan. 28 mental case kids and 2 teachers on a yellow school bus heading to the Metropolitan Museum of Art to look at ancient Greek and Roman stuff. I know, it sounds like torture. Most Yancey field trips were. But Mr. Bruner, our Latin teacher, was leading this trip, so I had hopes. Mr. Bruner was this middle-aged guy in a motorized wheelchair. He had thinning hair and a scruffy beard, and a frayed tweed jacket, which always smelled like coffee. You wouldn't think he'd be cool, but he told stories and jokes, and let us play games in class. He also had this awesome collection of Roman armor and weapons. So he was the only teacher whose class didn't put me to sleep. I hoped the trip would be okay. At least I hoped that for once I wouldn't get into trouble. Boy, was I wrong. See, bad things happen to me on field trips. Like at my 5th grade school, when we went to the Saratoga battlefield. I had this accident with a Revolutionary War cannon. I wasn't aiming for the school bus, but of course I got expelled anyway. And before that, my 4th grade school, when we took a behind-the-scenes tour of the Marine World shark pool. I sort of hit the wrong lever and on the catwalk, and our class took an unplanned swim. And the time before that, well, you get the idea. This trip, I was determined to be good. All the way into the city, I put up with Nancy Bobofit, the freckly red-headed kleptomaniac girl, hitting my best friend Grover in the back of the head with chunks of peanut butter and ketchup sandwich. I don't know about you, but that sounds a little disgusting. Anyway, Grover wasn't an easy target. He was scrawny. He cried when he got frustrated. He must have been held back several grades, because he's the only 6th grader with acne and the start of a wispy beard on his chin. On top of that, he was crippled. He had a note excusing him from PE for the rest of his life because he had some kind of muscular disease in his legs. He walked funny, like every step hurt him. But don't let that fool you. You should have seen him run when it was enchilada day in the cafeteria. Anyway, Nancy Bobofit was throwing wads of sandwich that stuck to his curly brown hair, and she knew I couldn't do anything back to her because I was already on probation. The headmaster had threatened me with death by in-school suspension if anything bad, embarrassing, or even mildly entertainment happened on this trip. I'm going to kill her, I mumbled. Grover tried to calm me down. It's okay, I like peanut butter. He dodged another piece of Nancy's lunch. That's it. I started to get up, but Grover pulled me back to my seat. You're already on probation, he reminded me. You know who will get blamed if anything happens. I looked back on it. I wish I decked Nancy Bobofit right then and there. and school suspension would have been nothing compared to the mess I was about to get myself into. Mr. Brunner led the museum tour. He rode up front in his wheelchair, guiding us through the big echoey galleries, past marble statues and glass cases full of arty, old black and orange pottery. It blew my mind that this stuff had survived for 2,000, 3,000, or 3,000 years. He gathered us around a 13-foot tall stone column with a big sphinx on the top and started telling us how it was a grave marker, a stele, for a girl about our age. He told us about the carvings on the sides. I was trying to listen to what he had to say because it was kind of interesting. But everyone around me was talking, and every time I told them to shut up, the other teacher, chaperone, Mrs. Dodds, would give me the evil eye. Mrs. Dodds was this little math teacher from Georgia who always wore a black leather jacket, even though she was 50 years old. She looked mean enough to ride a Harley right into your locker. She had come to Yancey halfway through the year when our last math teacher had a nervous breakdown. From her first day, Mrs. Dodds loved Nancy Bobofit and figured I was the devil's spawn. She would point her crooked finger at me and say, "Now, honey," real sweet, and I knew I was going to get after-school detention for a month. One time she had made me erase answers out of the old math workbooks until midnight. I told Grover I didn't think Mrs. Dodds was human. He looked at me real serious and said, "You're absolutely right." Mr. Brunner kept talking about Greek funeral art. Finally, Nancy Bobofit snickered something about the naked guy on the stele, and I turned around and said, "Will you shut up?" It came out louder than I meant to. The whole group laughed. Mr. Brunner stopped the story. "Mr. Jackson," he said, "do you have a comment?" My face was totally red. I said, "No, sir." Mr. Brunner pointed to one of the pictures on the stele. "Perhaps you'll tell us what this picture represents." I looked at the carving, and felt a flush of relief because I actually recognized it. "That's Kronos eating his kids, right?" "Yes," Mr. Brunner said, obviously not satisfied. "And he did this because, well," I racked my brain to remember. Kronos was the king god, and God? Mr. Brunner asked. "Titan," I corrected myself. "And he didn't trust his kids, who were the gods. So, Kronos ate them, right? But his wife hid baby Zeus and gave Kronos a rock to eat instead. And later, when Zeus grew up, he tricked his dad Kronos into barfing up his brothers and sisters." "Ew," one of the girls behind me said. "And there was this big fight between the gods and the Titans," I continued, "and the gods won." Some snickered from the group. Behind me, Nancy Bobofit mumbled to a friend, like we're going to use this in real life. Like it's going to say on our job applications, "Please explain why Kronos ate his kids." "And why, Mr. Jackson," Mr. Brunner said, to paraphrase Miss Bobofit's excellent question, "does this matter in real life?" "Busted," Grover muttered. "Shut up," Nancy hissed, and her face even brighter red than her hair. At least Nancy got pack 2. Mr. Bruno was the only one who caught her saying anything wrong. He had radar ears. I thought about his question and shrugged. I don't know, sir. I see. Mr. Brunner looked disappointed. Well, half credit, Mr. Jackson. Zeus did indeed feed Kronos a mixture of mustard and wine, which made him disgorge his other 5 children, who, of course, being immortal gods, had been living and growing up completely undigested in the Titan's stomach. The gods defeated their father, sliced him into pieces with his own scythe, and scattered his remains in Tartarus, the darkest part of the underworld. On that happy note, it's time for lunch. Mrs. Dodds, would you lead us back outside? The class drifted off, the girls holding their stomachs, the guys pushing each other around and acting like doofuses. Grover and I were about to follow when Mr. Brunner said, Mr. Jackson. I knew that was coming. I told Grover to keep going, then I turned towards Mr. Brunner. Sir? Mr. Brunner had hit this look that wouldn't let you go. Intense brown eyes that could have been 1,000 years old and had seen everything. You must learn the answer to my question. Mr. Brunner told me. About the Titans? About real life, and how your studies apply to it. Oh, what you learned from me, he said, is virtually important. I expect you to treat it as such. I expect only the best from you, Percy Jackson. I wanted to get angry with this guy pushing me so hard. I mean, sure, it was kind of cool on tournament days when he dressed up in a suit of Roman armor and shouted, What ho! And challenged us sword point against chalk to run at the board and name every Greek and Roman person who had ever lived and their mother, what god they worshipped. But Mr. Brunner expected me to be as good as everybody else, despite the fact that I have dyslexia and attention deficit disorder, and I had never made above a C- in my life. No, he didn't expect me to be as good. He expected me to be better. And I just couldn't learn all those names and facts, much less spell them correctly. I mumbled something about trying harder, while Mr. Brunner took one long, sad look at the stele, like he had been at this girl's funeral. He told me to go outside and eat my lunch. And with that, I'm gonna put a pause on here, and I will see you all in the next reading.